Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is the first of what we are hoping of many of Pacific's webinar series. The title for today is How SEO Can Save Your Business During a Time of Crisis. This webinar is intended to provide specific tips for sustaining and growing your website search rankings and traffic during the time in which your business can grow and stay ahead of your competitors both during and after the current crisis that we are in. I am Megan Barden, Director of Client Services, and I will be your moderator for today. So just a couple of notes on how we're planning to have this work today. Our presentation material will be about 40 to 45 minutes, and then we will conduct a question and answer session at the end. Please feel free to type your questions throughout the presentations in the Q&A section, and I will be gathering them, and then we'll go through them at the end. Please also make sure to remain on mute for the duration of the session, and then we will be sending a follow-up email with a recording of the presentation, as well as an opportunity to connect with us more on one-on-one basis if you so choose. And after that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Edward Mega, who is our Director of Sales and Business Development.
Thank you, Megan. So yes, my name is Edward Mega, Head of Business Development here at Pacific. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited. Many of you may not know who Pacific is, so I just wanted to give a quick overview. Our headquarters is located in beautiful San Diego, California. We have offices in London, Phoenix, and Mexico City. Pacific is a global brand and performance marketing agency that supports enterprise brands across various industries such as online education, travel, hospitality, e-commerce, and energy. Want to just provide you guys a quick overview of some of our clients. The main takeaway here as it relates to this webinar on SEO is that we support clients with websites with hundreds to thousands to millions of pages. As we go over this webinar, we'll kind of dive in how we take on those clients. Wanted to introduce our presenters. Jamie Boehner is Director of Strategy and Planning here at Pacific, and Sean Massey is Director of Marketplaces.
All right, thanks for the introduction, Edward and Megan. This is Jamie speaking. So just as a reminder, the themes that we're going to be covering today, the main themes are how to marry SEO and user experience design in your strategy. We're going to talk about how to use the search result landscape that reflects your priority keywords to guide your planning. We're also going to talk about how to make sure your technical foundation is sending search engines the right signals. Then we'll get into prioritizing what we like to call conversational search over some of the more trendy items like voice search that you've probably heard a lot about. We're going to touch on how brand building and search performance can actually work better together and give you some examples of that we've done with our own clients. And then we'll close with teaching you how to diversify what you think of as search engines and some actions you can take outside of the traditional formats like optimizing for Google. We recognize we have a lot of attendees from various industries, various levels of experience. Some of you are probably very familiar with SEO. Some of you probably haven't thought about it much until now. So we're going to be talking, we'll try to toe the line between not getting too far in the weeds, but giving you interesting items for the people that do know a little bit about how the stuff works, and then hopefully some new information that you can all take away. But we wanted to start very quickly. What was the purpose of this webinar? Why did we want to bring this to you? There's really three main reasons. So the first one is all about brand safety and brand sustainability in the face of this crisis. And I won't mince words about it. This is something none of us have been through. I've written a lot of crisis response plans and playbooks for brand. There was never a chapter about what to do when a global pandemic breaks out and how to make your way through that as a marketer. And like you, we have had to pause with our clients a lot of activities that just don't make sense right now in light of the crisis. A lot of our paid media campaigns, out-of-home campaigns, big, fun, crazy PR stunts and experiential events that are just, we can't do, and it wouldn't be the time. And you want to all make sure that we're not coming across, as people are dealing with this crisis, and even on a good day, to be honest, they're not thinking about us and about brands that much, but certainly right now, to misstep and have a marketing message come across as insensitive in light of what's going on would be a nightmare for anyone. And that's why I have the joke in here, if you're the HBO show Succession, we don't want to be ATN News with a misstep. Like, we here for you as our statement. So with having to worry about that and not wanting to come across in the wrong light to people and to their customers, there's one channel that doesn't have that same requirement to pause, and that's SEO. So that was really the first inspiration for why you can do that, which leads into the next point. SEO is a channel that is always on. It requires constant maintenance. We know we've met a lot of people and worked with when we first started our programs with them that think of it as a set it and forget it channel. Maybe you can do an audit of your website, you can optimize a few things, and then you're done. But the reality is you actually have to constantly maintain the quality of your website, refreshing content, finding new ways to beat the competition or to steal share away from them if they're running some kind of new strategies against you that Google's rewarding them for. It takes constant work and constant maintenance. So not only is it a channel that's safe for your brand to invest time in right now and resources and use it as a way to continue to grow business in a sustainable way while we're weathering this crisis, that's something you should be doing anyways when it comes to SEO. We always have to be continuing to optimize and introduce innovative strategies for it. And then that leads into the last point. SEO isn't just SEO anymore. You're going to hear us talk a lot today about how doing innovative approaches to SEO that you can use right now in the face of the crisis. These days, that means thinking more about how things like user experience design, things like conversion optimization can help your SEO strategy. And even things like if your creative teams and your social media teams and your PR teams are sidelined from activities they had planned to do, they can actually be a part of some pretty unique activations with SEO KPIs at the heart, but that can come through in the form of content marketing and other creative campaigns that you could actually still do a version of even in the midst of the crisis that we're going through right now. So that's why we're doing this. And now I want to get straight into the tips. We have 8 tips that ladder up to the 6 themes I mentioned. Some themes get more than one tip because we had a few things to share. And then some of the tips themselves even ladder up to multiple themes as you see as we start going through it. But for now, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Sean, for our first tip. Don't frustrate your customers.
Thank you, Jamie. Yeah, so as Jamie mentioned, we're going to be towing the line in between the getting in the weeds, but also introducing concepts. And a lot of these tips are going to be things that we would recommend doing at any time. And some of these tips are going to be very specific to the COVID-19 pandemic at the moment. And this first one is pretty specific. There's a lot of information that our customers and potential customers are seeking across various industries. And some of the big things they're searching right now, whether or not a business is open. So Google My Business recently has launched a few new guidelines for any business that has a single or multiple brick and mortar locations. So if you're a brand that has, a nationwide presence or regional presence for certain facilities or restaurants or storage companies, it doesn't matter. You can now update your account by saying that certain locations or all locations might be temporarily closed, as opposed to a permanently closed banner that you would normally see. Another one would be special hours of operation. So a lot of businesses now are shortening their hours to limit exposure to certain employees. This is pretty important when people are going to plan to leave their house, which is already an ordeal sometimes, to get to your business. And so you don't want to frustrate them when they think you're normally open till 8, but now you're only open till 6. And with that, you can also update your Google My Business listings to have more information itself about the format. So if you're going to be offering delivery or takeout, or maybe you actually only allow people to come up to the front of the business and not enter the business, Google is now allowing people to actually update the titles of their businesses in listings. So you can see in the example here, OfficeMax has curbside pickup available. Now, I don't know what typically you would do curbside at OfficeMax, but that's more information you can get if you call a number or if they have a landing page for that. But you wouldn't have known that necessarily had you normally just gone to their Google listing. So that's a pretty key piece that you can do right now during this crisis. And then the other thing Google is doing that is important to note is that they're pausing all reviews that might be negative in nature about a company because of this crisis. They don't want you as a business necessarily to have a lower Google average rating because there's some special circumstance that's been happening to your business as a result. And then anything that you actually edit yourself. So if you're a chain that's editing all your listings at once, you might see a lag on the time that Google actually publishes those listings because they're being slammed right now with edits. So that's just one little thing to note. But other than those main bullets, I think those are the key things specifically for a Google My Business listing. So I want to talk about also how not to frustrate your customers when they're searching for something in Google and they're not necessarily looking for the GMB listing. There's a lot of search volume right now that's being created overnight for new types of questions and some of the different, I call syntaxes of what people are searching. So you can do this at home too if you use just Google Auto Suggest, but you'll see that there's some common themes right now. Things like, is it safe to blank? People want to know if it's safe to order from Amazon, and do they need to clean the shipments when it comes to their house? Is it safe to order takeout food? This is just one example here. I've spoofed my IP in multiple locations and seen these questions change based on where I'm located. So Google's getting pretty good about your region and how it affects you specifically. You can also look at what people are searching for to basically spend their time at home. So there's a huge boom in online education right now when people who are either getting laid off, furloughed, or they are just trying to sharpen their skills while they work from home and they want to learn something new, right? That might be learning Photoshop to help them get a job as a creative. It could be learning something fun like yoga or Spanish from home. But this is a key time to think about how you would actually create content on your site to address some of these questions now. Because if there's, let's just say you're an online education provider for this middle example, and you have typically always focused on people trying to learn something, you may not have ever thought about how they're going to phrase it and how you might be able to raise above the pack if you're going to target something more specific to what they might be searching nowadays. So whereas learning something was a skill that you'd always want to focus on, maybe learning something from home during this is something that no one's targeting at the moment. So there's some advantages to basically being one of the first people to think about how searchers are changing their behavior based on the pandemic.
Yeah, and I'll just
jump
in.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to make the point that to piggyback on what you're just saying, I know we have a few people in the online education space on the call. We have a few people from retail. And you can see from the other example that Sean had here on the right, like I was saying, it's okay for you to notice if you're an e-commerce retailer, people are looking to find out if they can shop from you online. So when we were talking about SEO being a safe channel right now, not wanting to be insensitive, you're really just servicing a need that people still have even in the crisis. So this is kind of a great illustration of that.
Yep. Good point. And then the last one here is for helping people find the information they need directly on Google. So schema.org has recently launched something that allows you to give special types of announcements on your site that Google can find and display right on search. So they don't actually have to click into a listing to see something about maybe a closure, a canceled event, travel bans, any specific types of news updates. We can provide more information on this with the follow-up, but there's a certain type called special announcement schema that's recently been launched. You could think of this as something similar to when you go to Google now and you see anything related to the coronavirus has a banner at the top of Google telling you here's where to get more information from CDC. That type of banner type of announcement and other things can be now appearing next to listings if there's anything specific to this crisis. So that's a key piece to help people as well, since a lot of them might just be looking for answers right on Google. All right. So I'll take this too. I wanted to point out that while those three things were very specific, something that is becoming more highlighted now, but has been something we've been really preaching and believing in for a while, is how to integrate your SEO team with your UX team. Because more and more these days, they are synonymous and they are also becoming ranking signals to Google for search. So I'll kick off with kind of the concept that we think about all the time, which is how do we go from intersection to integration? Previously, we would say, okay, as an SEO myself, which I've been doing for a long time, and I've been working with designers of varying degrees of how we meet in the middle, because they might say, this doesn't look great, but I say, well, it's important for ranking. That overlap used to be, okay, well, we both mutually agree that we don't want people to bounce. We want them to go further in the site. We might also agree that we should show something specific for mobile versus desktop, or we might show them, this is where a block of keyword-rich content would go, or you know, a lot of SEOs in the past would also say, this is a shallow site structure, meaning that I don't want content to be too far deep in the weeds. I want people to be able to reach it from 1 or 2 clicks. Now, what we're saying is that there's a lot of integration that needs to happen where you can achieve both goals at the same time and call it a win by focusing on some of those same concepts, but delivering them differently. So for example, with the low bounce rate, I might now focus instead on page speed. I can say to a developer or designer, I think we should load these things first, and then these things can get lazy loaded, and that will speed it up by 0.5 seconds or something like that. But as you'll see in my next slide in just a second, that makes a huge difference. And then mobile first design. You've probably heard by now, if you've been in the world of SEO, that Google's now basically going to judge you based off of your mobile version of your site. In the past, if I was going to serve a user a different experience on a phone versus a desktop, that may have been a valid strategy, but now we really need to show them something very similar on both. So that way we can tell Google that, yes, we are thinking ahead of most people being on their phones when they browse as opposed to desktop. Here's the experience we offer them. In that design, you can now offer things that make sense on both devices, and it can still deliver some of the keyword type content you want to put on the site. But I would think of it now as more page intent and also user flow. So what page do I really want a user to land on our site when they're searching for a certain type of thing, versus this specific word needs to appear 5 times on this page versus 4 times on this page. So there's ways to work together now that I think are achieving the same goals and are really helping SEO really for you know, for what we're trying to achieve as a ranking signal. So my next slide, I just wanted to kind of show you real quick as an example. This is just, I have nothing against Home Depot. I just chose them as an example because I was recently talking to someone about jacuzzis. And if I was to do a search on a phone and I was to see how long it would take to load a page, this is more of an extreme example, but it is a recent example based off of a average connection speed. And you would see that as I'm looking across the seconds, the page loads at a certain amount. And I don't necessarily see the full image of a hot tub until around 7 seconds. So if you were to think about, okay, when would I possibly want to leave this? And Jamie, I think you point, yeah, so would here be the first place that maybe I would think about leaving because I need to see what I'm about to load, or would I wait to see actually more options before I think about leaving? And the reality is that about 90% of people actually bounce before we even reach the 5-second mark on your website. So unfortunately for this page of Home Depot, most people would actually have left before they learned anything about what they were searching for, and they might go search for somebody else instead who has a faster page. So this obviously impacts SEO because Google sees that fewer and fewer people are actually finding this page useful. And it also impacts UX because they want someone to actually come here and see what the heck they've designed. So page speed is a huge piece of the puzzle for both teams. The other thing too is that we often think about a website from SEO's perspective as what's on the page technically, like what content, what text, what images. But oftentimes we don't zoom out and think about how people are actually interacting with our content and with our site. And one of the studies that we do at Pacific all the time is we like to see how people actually hold their phone and interact with your content. And this design actually comes from something that Google provided themselves as a UX case study, where people naturally hold their phones with their right hand. And the reach in green on the left you see there is where your thumb naturally is able to reach without straining. And stretching and then hard to reach would be, I have to shift the phone in my hand to reach. You might think that sounds like something very pedantic or just that's going to the extreme of design, but those little cues sometimes make a difference in how someone experiences your website. For example, keeping the hot tub theme, on the left-hand side with Hot Spring, they put their menu icon, as most sites do, on the top right for a mobile device. So if I wasn't sure about what I'm reading on the page, I would be able to almost always be able to reach that menu icon, tap it, and see that, oh, they also offer these other models or these other price points. Whereas on the Home Depot site, it's on the left-hand side, which is a bit of a misstep because they might not think about where that menu icon is naturally, or it might just be easier for them to hit the back button on the bottom of their phone as it is to shifting and then clicking that menu. Again, it sounds like a small little thing, but over time, if you look at data, you see a big difference, a 20% higher exit rate on when a menu is on the top left versus the top right. If you think about how important business is right now, 20% is quite a bit. So that's just one tip for UX. And then the last point I want to make is about asking users how they like to browse. So another thing we do is we'll take actual focus groups, and you can do this remotely or you can do it in person, and you see how they actually like to shop. And we create these cards and we say, please put this in the correct order that you think you would go through this website until you're ready to convert. And then what we see is common themes across certain lines. So Jamie, if you answer the question here, how many convert without looking at pricing or reviews? The answer is 0. We see that every single person in the study wanted to see pricing and reviews before they were ready to do anything. And that makes sense, but you might not know how in order they want to get that information. So we like to look at that across the table. If it's high up, that means they're looking for that information right off the bat. Our landing pages should offer that information front and center. But if it's a little lower because they first want to go look at some images or they want to read something else, then that's not necessarily critical for a landing page. So that's where we kind of think about how to marry the two concepts together and push people further down the funnel. Jamie, hand it back to you.
Thank you, Sean. So tip number 3 is all about letting the search result landscape guide you. So what that means is basically whatever category you're in, whatever your key priority keywords are, it doesn't mean necessarily that your search results are going to look the same as another industry's, or even that your search results will have a consistent landscape in Google based on the different products and categories you're selling. And that's because Google has gotten so good at understanding the intent behind specific searches that its algorithm will decide if it thinks someone is looking for more research-based content, if they think people are looking for more bottom of funnel, they really want to buy something, if they're probably searching for something where Google sees that there's user behaviors where they tend to favor video results. So you can see, even for something like, let's say I was selling stack washers and dryers. I'm a retail company and that's one of my products. If I start looking at the competitive landscape and how Google decides that people searching for stacked washers and dryers are looking for information, that's going to determine what this landscape is, and it's going to determine what kind of features you can see here. So some of the common things that you will see variations in from different keyword segment or specific keyword to specific keyword, for some of the things that you sell, you might see that Google is featuring a featured answer where it's pulling content in that lives at the top of search results and kind of outranks everybody in what we like to refer to as position 0, even sometimes above ads and other features. You'll probably see something like these people also ask widgets, where Google has actually seen, because of so many search patterns, the more long tail questions that don't have a lot of search volume, but are the things that people are thinking about when they're searching for your products. And they're looking for websites that are answering those questions in addition to just maybe having the keyword mentioned a couple times. You're going to see things like video carousels, image carousels, which are also places where you can optimize for to own that real estate versus a competitor. And you're even going to see, especially for a lot of retail brands, things like this research snippet, where it knows that a stackable washer and dryer, it might be an item that's a little bit more expensive that I want a little bit more information about. So Google has its own special widget because it knows I need to research dryers. It's going to put video content in there. It's going to put editorial pieces where it's giving me more of that kind of question and answer format. So the first thing we always do when we start up with the client, and you can do this yourself, is start looking, and you can base this on your most priority keywords. What do the search results look like from keyword to keyword? And then who's ranking above you and why? And when you start to compare the links that you see here outranking you, you might notice that this is happening because those competitors have content and features on their websites that are servicing these other places, like the video widgets and those people also ask widgets. And you can start to find patterns in what Google likes for this kind of query, and that can guide your optimization strategy. Now, this is a retail example. It works the same. We have a lot of travel clients, and I'm happy to say a few of them are on the call with us right now. So their landscape is also completely different. And with them, even before this crisis happened, we've already spent a lot of time working with them on a separate crisis, which is that for travel, we have to compete with Google itself. So in the screenshot here, you can see all of these ads and this whole widget with hotels and maps, that's all Google. That's all pay-to-play space. So even if we're ranking #1 in this feature, we have to deal with this element of the landscape where there's a lot more ads than you might see in other industries and categories. But then we can also see here again, we have the ask widgets. So we're not just trying to rank for Las Vegas hotels. We can understand what other questions people have about Vegas hotels and how Google is favoring the sites that are answering those questions. There's a top stories widget that appears in this search result. So we can think about, again, I'll talk about this a little bit later, how are our PR and earned media efforts and link building efforts contributing to how we get featured here and how Google sees our sites as authoritative compared to another travel brand. So from landscape to landscape, this can guide your content strategy, and going back to Sean's earlier point, even your UX design on your website. And an example of how we'd implement that, this comes, it's in the e-learning and online career training space. So we did the same exercise. We looked at the landscape around the keywords they wanted to rank for, and we figured out what features we were missing or needed to have to optimize against the competition, and things we could add to capture those additional features, like a video carousel, image carousels, things like that. So you can see in the landing page template that we designed, we really wanted to capture those video search results and those video widgets. So we started producing video content that would allow us to rank there, and that we knew a lot of users to the site would rather watch as opposed to having to read in a lot of text-heavy content, especially on a mobile device. We figured out that a lot of the competitors Google were favoring had more user-generated content and testimonials and social proof than we did. So that was an opportunity to optimize that into the design of the page as well. We figured out that there were a couple things, tactics we could implement that were good for, again, SEO and UX and conversion optimization kind of working together. So for this client, the conversion for their target customer was about getting enrollments and making people feel like they knew all the steps in the process, which is information we got actually from interviewing customers. As Sean mentioned, you always get the best when you can use people. So we started creating a numbered list that we gave them all the steps they would need to complete this course, to get a job in this field. And then again, for them, that's a bit of CRO messaging, because we knew directly from customer research that's what people needed in order to convert. And then both that feature, and you can see we had a feature here of frequently asked questions. And I will talk about how SEO and voice search work together in a minute. But this is another play where we knew the questions people had. We could map those to keywords we were trying to rank for. And we could also optimize just for Google, but to have content in a format that would make it easier for a voice assistant to fetch and read out, for example, if someone was searching that way. So again, all these insights for this kind of thing, it comes from just looking at the landscape of your search results, figuring out what the competition's doing, and figuring out what Google likes best. All right, back to Sean for tip 4.
Yeah, so in addition to looking at the landscape, in this tip, I'm recommending that we take another look at ourselves and our own website. So I think there's no better time than to make sure that we as a client or as a website or as a brand have the strongest foundation possible. And one of those things is making sure that you're telling Google correctly what pages you think matter most. So even on a massive website of millions of pages, which, you know, we work with a lot of those types of sites, there is going to be a whole set of tiers per what type of intent someone's searching and what pages we think matter the most for that type of intent. And whether that's a product page or a category page or a guide or search results, we need to think about how we're shaping the site to address those needs. And I think one thing that stands out to me is internal linking as a signal itself. Sometimes the pages that we really think are important, or that some other team in the organization says we need to start talking about this new service or product, might be somewhat of an orphan of a page because we haven't figured out the best way to give the love that it deserves from the rest of the site. And especially for brands that have some stronger authority type sites, that can go a long way as opposed to trying to get backlinks. So if I were to say that, you know, this specific market's hurting right now, or this certain product isn't necessarily the most important piece, then that's where I can start thinking about, how do I go back and review what pages have been talking about those, and how do I update them to start pointing towards the things that matter the most right now? So that's kind of the first part of my tip for this. My next tip is avoiding too much keyword overlap. So when you start to go through that and you think about how the structure of linking looks, and that's a very technical exercise, I admit. One thing that most people could do though is think about where they're focusing certain keywords on the site because there's going to be overlap. I choose an example here of storage. There are so many ways to say storage, even though off the top of your head, you wouldn't think there would be, because people usually look for some sort of affinity or modifier on top of it. Same goes for travel, right? So I'm looking for a hotel or a motel or a cabin or a Airbnb or whatever. For storage, it could be a mini storage, RV storage, etc. And so when I think about where that lives on the site, I might find that when I go and review, we often mention those things on multiple pages and we're not really clear about which one should be about which. And if I were to work with my UX team, I might say, you know what, we should offer some images, some modules, and some other things on this page that really help people understand how their RV could be parked or fit, or it could be emptied into a storage unit, all on this page. And then as an SEO, I think about how this is the page now that I'm going to be talking about RV. And from other pages, when I reference RV, I want to point it to this. So that's how the two kind of tips work together. And then my third tip is that within the section is that a lot of times we often look over or pass over schema as a signal. There is free schema to be used liberally for any page that offers any of these types of services. And that can be for local businesses, products. It could be, I think one that gets overlooked a lot is software applications. If you offer any sort of service that's digital, this is an important one. Things like reviews, pricing, availability, classes and schedule times, or even things you could book directly from Google are all options you can do with schema as a signal. And it sends a stronger idea to Google that this is exactly what not just the website, but this web page is about. And then my last one in here is getting it right internationally. So we know that a lot of people have a presence more than just outside the US. And when they do, oftentimes there's another extension of the site, right? There's a .co.uk or a .de for Germany, et cetera. And with that comes usually currency changes, language changes, and then sometimes even design or other things that make more sense for those markets. And a critical piece of this is making sure that you have certain technical tags set up properly. The key ones I think of are hreflang and canonical tags, which both are, again, technical, but are important to send a signal that this is the US version and this is the UK version. And when you talk UK, I want you to show this in GBP for the price. I want you to mention this language, and I want you to also reference all these other things related to UK. And sometimes when we go through and we might audit a site or we might go and review it, we find that they cross-link to each other. And so somehow the US is linking to the UK when it shouldn't, and now we're sending mixed signals to Google. So that's one other piece of making sure you're telling Google the right stuff. All right.
All right, I'm going to jump back in. This is a fun one. So the next tip is all about kind of downplaying the overhype about voice search and training yourself to think more about something we like to call conversational search. So what that is if you've ever been to a marketing conference in the last 3 or 4 years, all you've heard is that voice search is the big thing. There's a lot of hype around it. And certainly people are using voice assistants, whether it's through their phone or device like Google's or Amazon's home devices. But the reality is, even though consumer behavior is pointing towards people using voice more, transactionally speaking, across pretty much every industry that we work in with our clients, we have not seen a huge uptick in people buying a lot of stuff through voice search. That could change, but the hype around how fast it's changing, I would be a little bit dismissive of. But what we've seen that's more important and more actionable, that actually can still help you optimize for voice for the future, is that we actually don't just talk into our devices. Nowadays, we type like we talk, meaning that, as you can see in this graph here that came from an SEO tool named Ahrefs, where they analyzed almost 1 billion search queries to really understand the search volumes between all these different things that Google was seeing. Almost 93% of the searches that happen every month have a search volume of about 0 to 10. It's incredibly low. So most of the things that people spend most of their time on Google looking around for are what are referred to as very long tail, very detailed, very specific searches. They're recognizing that Google can find just about anything for them or other search engines, so they're being super specific in the questions that they're asking. Queries are actually getting longer, not shorter, and that's the majority of the activity we see on search engines. So the kind of keywords that your paid search team, for example, is probably spending a lot of money to bid on, those really big high volume ones, that's such a tiny fraction of search behavior that's going on that's going to actually lead people to your brand. So how do you optimize for this trend? The first thing we always like to say, one of my favorite quotes about this, it's from the film Ex Machina, if you're familiar with it. It's about a genius that creates the best search engine in the world, and then he starts playing around with artificial intelligence, and of course it doesn't go well. But this quote's great. It's a way to think about this. You know, most people think of search engines as a map of what people are thinking, but in reality, they're a map of how people think. And how this relates to your content strategy is, as I mentioned, Google is so good, and they get to see so much data at understanding how people are thinking about the things that they're going to want to buy from you. They really understand the intents behind these different searches, especially these very long, detailed ones. So when we work with a travel brand or retail brand, we're already pretty well versed in thinking about things like, for travel, of course, we'd like to rank for something like all-inclusive resorts, Cabo. And we've thought about a lot of the modifiers that people would put with those searches that have a lot of search volume, you know, all-inclusive, family-friendly, all-inclusive 5-star. This is a very competitive query for us to try to go after. So even for some of the big travel brands that we work with, like Expedia or Hotwire, for example, this is going to be pretty bloody real estate to win. But as you can see on the example on the right, a more typical search, even though we wouldn't notice it if we were looking just like at search volumes, but the ways people are thinking, how they're thinking about their trip. I might be planning a family trip where I'm searching for the best all-inclusive resorts in Cabo San Lucas for families. Again, you wouldn't see the search volume there, but those kind of searches are a lot more of what's happening every day on Google. And we can see here, and I can speak from our experience travel industry, even for the big brands we work with, someone we always compete against, that we're always fighting with, is TripAdvisor. Because Google just loves them. They have so much content. They have so much user reviews and trust signals. We're always fighting with them. But you can see in this example, TripAdvisor is not winning here. It's actually this website, familydestinationguide.com. They have pulled off what many of us often bang our heads against the wall in travel SEO doing. They're beating TripAdvisor. And the reason they were able to do this, again, thinking about intent, how are people thinking about their trips? What questions are they asking that are outside of our big high volume keywords? You can see that here again in the search landscape, Google has that people also ask widget with all of the other questions that they see like this, that people that are thinking the same way this searcher is thinking are asking about resorts in Cabo San Lucas. And familydestinationguide.com was able to do a better job than TripAdvisor of analyzing those questions, writing content to them, and signaling to Google that they were actually a more authoritative site to show ahead of someone who's a massive authority like TripAdvisor. So again, even if you're a challenger brand, you're going up against the biggest competitors in your industry, there are ways to do this. And it's about thinking more than just the tradition of the high volume keywords. We need to do, as done, a better job of thinking about the intent behind what people are searching for. And even these long tail things can be mapped to the high volume keywords you want to rank for, and they can help you get there as long as you design your content to address these kind of longer tail questions. The other thing you can do to get better at the concept of conversational search is going completely outside of SEO research tools. And the way we do this is we apply social listening data from listening tools and software that a lot of your social media or CRM teams probably are familiar with. To analyze it on top of what we're seeing with search trends. So for example, I'm sure a lot of you, especially your PR and social teams, use some kind of social listening tool to monitor your brand health and mentions of your brand. And we do that too. But there's a lot more you can do with the software where we can actually look at the different patterns and volumes and pockets of conversation around our client's industry, around all the various products that they might be selling, around technology trends, other affinities that the audiences we're trying to reach have. And we can see with the volumes there and the sentiment there, how else we can map our search content strategy to getting this larger reflection of the conversation that we wouldn't see if we were just sitting in Keyword Planner and trying to think of what to write about or what to optimize for. And I can give you an example in the snapshot on the bottom. We did this for a self-storage company where we did all of our sort of SEO-focused research, and then we used a social listening tool to identify what else had a lot of volume that we weren't thinking about. We saw massive pockets of conversation around the affinities for home design, which is a trigger for people needing storage. We saw more volume than we thought there would be for vehicle storage, even more than what we would see in something like Keyword Planner. And then we found a couple little pockets of conversation that inspired some of our content marketing and brand campaigns, like finding people talking a lot about how the items that they had in storage were treasures to them and not just junk or clutter, and that we could use that to differentiate how our client positioned themselves versus their competitors. So there's a lot you can do when we talk about conversational search, both with SEO tools, with social listening, and even manually, talking to people that can then be baked into your content strategy. And as an example of this, we used this exact same approach recently for one of our travel clients. They were trying, it was a very simple SEO project. They wanted to rank better for keywords related to London and Heathrow Airport and hotels near Heathrow, with the knowledge that we had seen a trend where, because so many flights would get canceled or rescheduled, people were constantly searching for kind of an on-the-fly accommodation in and around or between London and Heathrow. We wanted to rank for it. So there was a very simple SEO ask. We applied all these conversational search tricks to figure out not just what people were searching for, but how they would be talking about these kind of situations, what they would need in those kind of moments. And we built a microsite to address all of that, where if someone was suddenly faced with a layover, they needed a hotel very quickly around or near Heathrow, they had more time to kill than they thought, they wanted to get back into London, could they do it based on their time? We saw people talking about celebrity restaurants in the airports and where to find them. We took all of that conversational search insight and put it in the microsite. And as a result, we were able to drive for our client 190% increase in organic traffic, coming from improvements in both the rankings of those keywords around London and Heathrow Airport, and then starting to help the client rank for new searches such as restaurants in Heathrow, transportation between Heathrow and London. So again, if you go away from just thinking about keywords and try to understand the conversation and the intent and the needs of travelers, it can drive really big results for you. And then this goes back to the points that Sean was touching on earlier. Part of the reason we were able to get those ranking improvements goes right back to what Sean just mentioned about combining SEO and user experience design, making your website mobile friendly, making it easy to use, making it fast, and addressing the needs that people have in whatever kind of customer journey you're trying to address. It also gives you an opportunity to have the kind of content strategies on your website that translate really well to things like social media amplification and things that can even be leveraged in, for example, an out-of-home campaign, a place where you would never think of SEO driving something like out-of-home advertising. In this case, it did, because we understood there'd be no better place for us to promote this microsite than in the airport where people most needed it. So this is, we'll talk about again in a couple minutes about how brand building and SEO work together, but this is a good example. So back to Sean for tip 6, and we're getting close, and then we'll try to open it up to questions for you all.
Yeah, there's only 8 tips, so we're almost there. Yeah. But that was awesome. Okay, so I think a big thing right now, and has been for a while, is that people are looking for the most updated or relevant content. And usually they are looking for something that has been updated within the same day, even. Think about the news cycle, and then also think about how that affects anyone that's got new policies that are up to date. So when we think about content, we're trying to not only think about what's most relevant and timely, but also how often we're updating that content. And sometimes you might think of a page that doesn't need to be refreshed often, like maybe it's a product page or it's a standard facility type page, but just updating that content on a frequent basis is actually itself a signal to Google. At least we've found, we've tested, and we've seen to be successful. And kind of backing that up, there was a study done by a favorite tool of ours, Spotify, that actually saw that the frequency of how often you updated your content affected how often Google came back and crawled your page. And we know that if they're coming back and crawling your content more frequently, they're thinking that this page might be something relevant or fresh for a user who does a search tomorrow or the next day. And with that, they found also, and we kind of confirmed this on our own studies as well, that we see the average URL position or rank for a set of keywords tied to a page actually improve with the refreshing of that content. Another key thing to point out, though, is that this isn't a lasting effect. So when you stop refreshing the content, it's almost like turning off paid search, where you see it kind of drop. So it's something to stay on top of, but also not just change a word here or there, but think of how it could actually help the user on that page. Another idea that I kind of want to point out is that if you look at these 2 screenshots, these are things that I had pulled on Wednesday, and April 1st was Census Day, and also April 1st was pretty much big day for everyone who was trying to pay rent or do anything during this crisis, right? And so a lot of news articles that were coming out were timestamping their editorial. And that is a huge thing now that gets pulled into Google. So if I'm scrolling through something and I'm seeing what's being shown, I might not click on the March 26th, but I do want to click on the April 1st because it has the most up-to-date information. And whereas on the census example, you know, that's a very critical timestamp because it's on the same day that everything is due. I would want to know what information has been updated possibly by the government if there's been an extension. Versus on the other side, this is more of a commerce type play where, yeah, I want to know what the latest travel alert or information is about certain locations, or even what policies have been updated for that specific airline or hotel brand. And so getting timestamps on your content is actually going to help people go further into your site or read more because they know that they're getting the most recent information. And then the last piece here too is updating your messaging. So you've probably received 1 million emails from every single service or company you've ever worked with talking about what they're doing to, as a safety precaution, to protect their workers and also their customers. But oftentimes you go to the website and you might not see an update. You only got it in that email format. And so you may have overlooked that. And some brands are actually taking this to heart, and on the homepage or on their key pages, they're putting information that talks about what are they doing right now for, you know, delivery or for takeout or anything like that. But also your value propositions that would be your standard value props for any site, like, hey, we have thousands of reviews, come read our reviews, or we have 1 million options for you to choose from. Whatever that guarantee or anything that might have been something that is, you know, interesting or intriguing for someone to come and use your site might not currently be their most important desire for why they would use your service. Now you'll see sites like TripAdvisor, for example, putting in different filters at the top of their search, things like free cancellation, reserve now, pay, stay later, or what special offers they have at the moment. And those are the filters that are present at the very top of the page at where they used to be further down just a month ago. So I think making sure you're updating your site to address what you know your most commonly requested needs are from your customers could be a huge play in order to get people to want to either rebook business with you or to do business with you during this whole thing. All right.
Okay, I'm going to try to fly through the last two. I know we're going to be short on time. We probably will go a little over. So if you don't forget, you can chat your questions to Megan via Zoom. We will respond to all of them via email if we don't have time at the end here. But let's talk about brand and search working better together. Now, this is probably one of the most controversial tips in here because it involves teams integrating and collaborating with each other on a project, particularly teams that don't usually do that, such as SEO and maybe your creative or your brand team. So here's the proof of how it works. I need to introduce you to a website we worked on called flights.com. So this was a very small up-and-coming challenger brand in the travel industry, having to compete with all the big players, the other online travel agents, the other hotel and flight chains, where the landscape was incredibly competitive. So we started with, and this is kind of the tip within the tip, when you're in that position and you just don't feel like you can take the big sites on, you need to find a backdoor, a way in, a less competitive keyword segment to target. It still has enough volume to get you started, but you're not trying to go straight for cheap flights to Vegas or the things that you just wouldn't be able to rank for at the beginning. In the case of flights.com at the time, a lot of airlines and travel agency sites were not talking a lot about flight route searches, meaning not just trying to optimize for cheap flights to Vegas, but things like flights from Los Angeles to New York City, or even for frequent travelers that have a higher lifetime customer value, they even know the airport code. So there's actually a decent amount of search volume for things like next to JFK. So we found that as a good content strategy to get flights.com ranking pretty well for those queries. But we wanted to go after the bigger, so we needed to do more to kind of get that hockey stick in our performance once the site got sort of established in Google's eyes. So we did this for flights.com. We did on the surface what looked like a brand building campaign where we had creative visual assets. We had a whole social media strategy. We were working with some influencer partners to promote the brand. And we created a campaign all about challenging the trope that millennials want experiences versus things, and to find out, is that really true? People still love iPhones and technology. So we put out a challenge for people to choose travel over the latest tech. And we started with a parody video on YouTube of all the kind of famous unboxing videos. And then we built a microsite that had the same theme as the campaign about choosing travel over a more retail focused purchase and the value of that and getting that experience. So there are all kinds of creative elements going on with this project, but at the core of it, we built this microsite because we wanted to leave something behind that would have a long-term benefit for SEO. So the microsite had the YouTube parody video embedded in it. It had a series of articles rewritten about all the different trips you could take that would cost the same as a smartphone or a smartwatch. And then through the microsite and through all of those articles, we were always cross-linking to the most important commercial pages that we were trying to improve rankings for flights.com. And that's a classic SEO strategy, but it's still a very powerful one. So when we started doing all the PR related activities and doing things like crashing the launch of the iPhone in New York City and getting people to get out of line and travel with us and getting media attention and working with partners and getting a lot of really great backlinks to this microsite, we saw that equity, that authority from the brand building transfer over to these pages that we were linking to throughout the microsite. And then our commercial pages started doing better as a result of the brand building campaign. And then additionally, I said SEO doesn't look like SEO anymore. In order to get that result, though, we did a lot of things that are the type of activities, if your creative team, your PR teams have a lot of things they can't do right now, they can still help you with things like this. And in the example of flights.com, yes, we went to New York City. We tried to pull people out of line that were trying to buy their phones. We gave them VR goggles to check out all the places they could travel to. We dared a couple of people that actually took our challenge and won a travel voucher from us because they were willing to leave the line. We were driving trucks around New York City with out-of-home messages around the campaign. And we got a lot of attention out of it that, again, that earned media, those brand mentions, those great backlinks that came out of this were the things that allowed the commercial side of the website to improve rankings. And then as a result, 30 days after the campaign wrapped up, we weren't doing any other activities. There was no paid social, no paid search, nothing going on with SEO. But when the campaign wrapped up a month later, we saw a 140% increase in organic traffic year over year from all of the rankings improvements that campaign had driven, and a 59% increase in flight bookings that month, which was record-breaking for flights.com, which was great. But that trend continued for the entire rest of that year. We broke our records for traffic and bookings from SEO every month. And we weren't doing anything besides we launched this campaign and then just sat back and decided we would see what it would do for SEO long term. So this is my favorite case study because it really is the proof of this for similar activities. Now, right now is a difficult time to think about brand building and content marketing. So I would just advise you, and this is a conversation we're having with our clients, again, going back to that, what can we talk about? What's okay to mention? You know, I'll use travel as an example. In the last few weeks, the big problem has been that customers needed help with cancellations, rebooking things, finding out if they could get changeable dates. So really, that was the only thing we could talk about. Now, long term, we don't want to just go completely dark. We don't want to lose, again, our rankings and our authority. So some things you could do with an element of content marketing or with your creative team, your PR teams, people still need information that's useful and relevant, and they still need inspiration and entertainment. We're all stuck at home. We're looking for things to take our mind off what's in front of us. Again, you want to be careful with what kind of angles you take, but you don't have to turn everything off. And if you can find an angle that's appropriate for your brand, you can do the same thing we did with flights.com, where you bake in SEO KPIs behind the things that look like they're just there for PR or content marketing that will help your site maintain its performance through the months we know a business will be impacted by the continuing coronavirus crisis. The last tip, and then we'll try to get into some questions, is to diversify your definition of search engines. We always think about Google. We've talked about Google a lot today, but there's a lot of platforms which we tend to think of as only social media platforms that get millions and millions or even billions of visitors in the case of YouTube every month. And people use these as search engines as well. We just don't think about it. You know, marketers tend to think of SEO as just this. It's always Google, these kinds of searches that people do. But the reality is people search for things like this. They're going to all these different channels. They're using those search bars in YouTube to look for videos about the places they want to travel to. They're looking for recommendations in Facebook. They're looking for inspiration in Pinterest. These are all really search engines of a sort. And they have things like search volume, the things that SEOs always talk about when it comes to Google. Or in something like Instagram, the hashtag Las Vegas Strip is associated with 4.9 million posts. So people are doing all kinds of activities on these channels. And there are ways we can optimize for them. And if you can do that, and we'll use YouTube as an example, you're going to skip ahead of your competitors, because let's take a big keyword like Las Vegas hotels. It's got a huge search volume on Google. It has that same search volume on YouTube too. But what do you notice here? There's no brands. No one is ranking for video content related to this. Same thing with a travel query, like things to do in San Diego with kids, decent search volume. Again, no brands competing in the search results. Let's do something like Las Vegas Travel Guide though. Now here's someone we know. It's one of the clients we actually work with, Expedia, ranking for this #1. Now you'll notice this query doesn't have a ton of search volume. Doesn't matter though, because look at the video views. We have 1.5 million views on this video from Expedia. And also you'll notice that the brand video is outranking all of these big influencers and people that you might think you wouldn't be able to take on and outrank in a platform like YouTube, but clearly you can if you think about it more like a search engine that you can optimize. Now, usually that would be prohibitive for some of you because getting really good on YouTube means you need more video content. Video content's expensive to produce. There are ways around that though nowadays. One of the approaches we were using with clients we call content play is we're actually taking a lot of the content we've already built for them. That could be blog articles, could be product descriptions, but it's always things where we at least have still images, if not video footage already shot, that we can take and run through software, and we can use motion graphic animations, we can create our own animations, we can make it look like moving footage or a slideshow, and we can add text overlays and links to product pages, and then all of a sudden, without having to go to a production house, you can have a scalable and affordable way to crank out a ton of videos. You can put them on a channel like YouTube and optimize your descriptions of the videos, the way you've tagged the videos. Again, you have a lot of opportunities through YouTube's platform to have links going to your commercial site to get people from YouTube into your booking or your purchase funnel. So don't think about this as being something that's cost prohibitive. There are ways to do it, and we can talk more about that in our follow-ups. I'll kind of skip ahead so we can go straight to the Q&A, but you can see using pretty easy tools, working with maybe your agency partners, as a lot of our clients do. We can do it in-house. You don't have to spend a ton of money to get good content for it, and a search engine like YouTube. That was a lot. Quick review: marry SEO and UX. Use the landscape of your search results. Make sure your technical foundation strong. Prioritize conversational search over overhyped things like voice. Brand building and search can work better together. We can prove it. And diversify what you're thinking about as search engines. So with that, if anyone's still on the call, apologies for going a few minutes over. We're happy to take a few minutes of questions and answers.
Good work, Jamie.
Megan, do we have any questions from the crowd that we could address really quick? You might be on mute, Megan.
I think she may have gotten booted. Ed, are you still there?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, there's Megan.
I'm here. Sorry about that. My internet just completely freaked out. All right. So let's get into the Q&A section. We had a couple of questions come in through the session. So we'll go ahead and start with those first. The first one being, does refreshing content on a page have lasting impact on rankings?
I'll take that one, Jamie. Is that all right?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Yeah, so good question. So I mentioned that it stopped when we stopped refreshing content, right? But there is some sort of residual with how you come back to your bucket of keywords that you may have been associating with those pages you're refreshing, and seeing that they tend to still outperform maybe your initial position on Google when you first started the experiment or the refreshing. But I have to caution you that it didn't last long. So when we looked at it on a chart, it was almost literally a bell curve of when we started to when we stopped. And I think the solution for it was to figure out what a more sustainable or scalable option was for content that you could refresh. So we like to use a couple different tools, one of them being Wordsmith, that helps with programmatic content. So that way, when you actually create the content, you're creating versions of it that you can kind of queue up, and you can upload at different points to kind of maintain that ranking. So I hope that answers the question. It wasn't necessarily the most lasting ranking afterwards. You kind of have to stay on top of it.
Okay, great. Second question, and this is a two-parter. The first part is, what are some other ways to get user feedback similar to the user flow study?
You want to take that first, Sean, and then I have, okay.
Well, I'll jump in after.
Okay. Some additional ways we do that, you can do something like in-person customer interviews. So in cases where we have clients that have an actual storefronts, they have brick and mortar locations, we will go there and meet with their store managers to interview them. We'll meet with real customers to find out details about how they found the brand, how they maybe searched for us online, what brought them in, what were the value propositions that were attractive to them. That's a little more qualitative. It's hard to do it at scale, but I always get the best stuff from talking with people face to face. Or another alternative that Sean and I use quite frequently is a tool called user testing. So this is a digital tool where we can create a series of prompts for people that sign up to do these studies, usually to get access to gated content or some other incentive. And then you can instruct them to do things like search for your product and service. They'll be recording themselves as they're doing this. And you ask them questions like, explain to me which brand you would pick in the search result and why. And then they'll be talking live, explaining, I like this one because it has a higher star rating, or I'm going to click on this result because it has more reviews. I can see that in the little metadata snippet. I like reviews, so I'm going to click on this website. So things like that, they're sort of almost like digital focus groups where you can get a lot of great insights for UX design. You can also use tools where you can put a pixel on your website that without interviewing people and having that sort of live feedback, it will record sessions, and you can set it to make sure it cuts off before people start doing things like entering credit card information, make sure you're GDPR compliant if you're in Europe and UK. But the tools will find patterns where it'll show you there's a certain point where a large percentage of people drop off in the user flow. You might have a problem with like a friction point, or you're not answering the right question there. It'll show you where people are like rage clicking on a button that's not really a button. So you might find insights there. So a lot of those digital tools are great for understanding user flow and getting customer feedback.
Great. And you answered the second part, which is essentially any way of doing this at scale. So.
Oh yeah. So those kind of tools. And go ahead, Sean, actually on this one.
Yeah, no. I mean, I was just going to second everything you said, but I would add to that the user testing and the in-person and even focus groups, in my mind, is anecdotal. It highlights where to focus first. The data and like tools like Full Story or analytics, whatever you would use to collect the data for the larger population, will help you know if what you're learning in those other examples is true or if it affects a large amount of users. And so you can use that information combined to figure out to a certain degree of certainty that making this change will make a difference, because we heard about it here first and we saw it play out this many times, and we know it's going to have an effect.
Yeah, and I'll follow that up too with what Sean just mentioned, that so it's not just about you can do it at scale, but just doing it at all, you will often find some immediate quick wins for your website. And I'll give an example. Sean will remember this. I can't mention the name of the company, but we did one of those similar usability studies with like the paint and where your thumb can go. And as we started looking at it, we immediately saw that they had a pop-up that would come on the mobile version of their website that would actually cover up the hamburger menu. It was something to sign up for their email newsletter or whatever, but all of a sudden the pop-up was blocking your ability to navigate the website, and you couldn't X out of the pop-up. So it was just stuck there, and people just couldn't go anywhere else on the site once it appeared. So it was immediately, we found an insight like, let's fix that today. So there are ways to do it with scale, as Sean mentioned, but doing even a little bit of it at all, you'll be surprised how many quick wins kind of immediately get surfaced from those sort of exercises.
Yep.
Great. All right, and final question that we received, if anyone else has any other questions, feel free to submit them now. But this question is, one of our best performing pages in search is currently a product we're about to stop carrying. What should I do with the page to keep getting that traffic?
Yeah, I'll take a first stab at that. So I imagine there's going to be a couple of these examples throughout the month, right, where certain things are out of stock or you're no longer carrying a certain brand. In my experience, when we've done anything like trimming, or there has been a reason for a page that no longer exists, and it was a key performer in search, like it sounds like this person was mentioning, you typically want to not just redirect that page to somewhere, but you also want to think about what role that page played on the site. So if I'm no longer carrying a specific product, but I have no alternatives to that product that I can send them to, then I might want to point that page back to the category so they can find something else that would fill that need. Versus if you do offer other products, like you no longer carry this brand, but you carry this brand, you can figure out a way to either redirect to those brands to kind of point the equity you had to those, or keep the page and say, sorry, that's no longer in stock. Here are some other options. And you don't do anything to the URL. You just change what you show right there on the page and offer your customers another solution. So you kind of have two ways to play it based off of how you want to direct the user. Yeah. Jamie, do you have anything to add to that?
No, that was perfect.
Okay.
Okay, great. Those are all the questions that were submitted throughout the course of the presentation. So I'll pass it over to Edward for some closing remarks.
Thanks, Megan. I hope everyone got a lot out of this webinar. We certainly had fun putting it on. I'm going to follow up with everyone afterwards to provide the recording as well as a link to the next webinar we will be hosting at the end of the month. Additionally, for the month of April, we're offering a free 30-minute consultation and a free keyword analysis. Please let me know if you'd be interested in these offerings. I'm happy to jump on a call. All right, folks, that is all. My email address is below with my phone number. Feel free to reach out.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
you, guys.
everybody.